Hello again, this is David Lundeen of TSC Printronix Auto ID with another coffee break chat. Today we'll be chatting with Travis Wayne, who is a global product manager at TEKLYNX. TEKLYNX offers a host of label design solutions, including CodeSoft, Label Matrix, and Label View, as well as great solutions for enterprise label management, including their Label Archive application. Today we'll be talking about why it's critical to print accurately and efficiently, and how a combination of Printronix ODV 2D printers and TEKLYNX Label Archive can help you manage through today's issues of labor shortages and supply chain issues. So welcome, Travis. Can you introduce yourself, please?
All right, great. Thank you, David. Yeah, my name is Travis Wayne. I'm at TEKLYNX as the global product manager here. Been in my role for almost 5 years now. And got to see a lot of interesting things along the way, and definitely really interesting in the last couple of years with everything that's been going on in the world. So thank you, David.
You're welcome. TEKLYNX is an important strategic partner of ours. We've been working together. Travis, I think we first met and started talking about working together probably 3 or 4 years ago at a UDI trade show. Is that right?
Yeah. It was 2018. I think we were in Baltimore, Maryland, at the UDI conference. But TEKLYNX and Printronix Auto ID and TSC have been working together from a driver perspective for quite some time, probably 20 plus years. But we have really re-engaged from the UDI show for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and some of the stuff we've been talking about recently is how critical it is to print accurately and efficiently. And then we were kind of tying this into currently there's a shortage of labor. There's all kinds of disruptions in product flow and in the supply chain. So one of the things I know on our side that we promote with our Printronix ODV 2D printers is the fact that it's a labor-saving device. We print out labels that are checked so that you don't have to have a human being on the outside of the printer with a scanner, for instance, scanning and to make sure that the labels are read, because we've got customers out there who, if their barcode labels can't be read, they have compliance issues with the vendors that they're shipping to, and they can face huge fines. Have you found the same, or I mean, you've worked with customers with these same issues?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually encountered customers that have sent label shipments out as a third-party labeler and found that they had incorrect serial numbers on there. They had to return the labels, lots of cost, lots of time and effort associated to that one mistake. And I think a lot of companies are really looking to increase the quality of all of their labels and not just doing random checks, but really ensuring the quality across all of their labels. Yeah, and just to go back to the labor shortage, and whether it's a labor shortage, a disruption, realignment, I mean, there's many facets to that, and we could probably go on for quite a while, but I think the end goal is to really become more efficient within your workspace to address any of those potential labor or even qualified resources that you may need.
Okay, so this is kind of enterprise label management solutions?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if we can define what enterprise label management means and how those processes and solutions can be transferable from one organization to another.
Well, in many cases, if you get down to the basics of it, you're putting a label on a container, a box, a product, and it has identifiable information on there, more than likely includes a barcode of some sort. And what happens is all of the information that somebody can leverage in an automated fashion. For instance, you've been to grocery stores and they scan it, and that's really the go-to. But from an enterprise label management standpoint, now it's not just one, and it's not just one product. It could be many products, and it could be many different types of labels, many different types of barcodes. And so what we have is our central product, which includes Label Archive and Sentinel, and I can describe those a little bit more. But basically, our central product allows for a browser-based interface to be able to select a label template, which integrates with your data set. And then you can drive the printing directly from that interface. That may not be as important to the discussion when we're talking about quality. The quality component that we're really trying to capture here with the Printronix Auto ID ODV2D and our label archive solution is the ability to go all the way from the beginning where I have a label, I'm designing that label, I need to get that label approved through quality assurance. Then I can take that approved label and put it into production where it can then be leveraged, printed, and then scanned by the ODV2D. Previous to the ODV2D solution that Printronix Auto ID and TSC offers, a lot of random scannings. So you print out 10,000 labels and apply them, but as they're being printed out every 100 or 1,000 labels, somebody goes and does a quality check on that label. Is the barcode correct? Maybe it has more than one barcode on it. Are all the barcodes correct? They have to manually then record that information and or stop that print job and say, ooh, the ribbon was off, or it looks like one of the printer head, there was a problem with that. What the ODV2D solution allows is for real-time scanning of those labels and all of the barcodes on those labels. It then captures all of that detail, including the ISO grade, and it stores that information. And in the event that there was an error or a problem with any of those labels, it actually stops. It can back it in, it can overwrite a label, and then attempt to print it again correctly. So that capturing of all that information, and maybe this is a good time just to talk about, how the idea came to us when we were at the UDI convention.
Yeah, absolutely. As I recall, Label Archive was this cool product that had some of the features that Printronix offered in its PrintNet Enterprise, but took it to dimensions that we never had. So can you kind of explain the architecture of Label Archive? And our interest, I know, was on the database side about capturing all the data that was coming back from the printer. So if you can give us a highlight on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. And, at a high level, Label Archive really allows you to do compliance to meet the, FDA standards, industry standards for 21 CFR Part 11. It allows, like I said earlier, to do approval of a label design. And then it also has the security. So there's encryption on the back end, there's login and password, there's roles for users. So somebody might be able to print, but they definitely can't design, and they definitely can't approve a label. So we have roles for all of those functions as well in meeting those regulated industry requirements. And then there's traceability. So who did what and when did they do it? So when was this label created as a draft? When was it submitted to QA? When did QA sign off on it? When was it put into production? And when was it printed? And how many labels were printed at that time? Well, so we're at the show and I get to see the Printronix ODV2D in action, and I'm like, well, that is super interesting. And then we had people that were going through the event and stopping by, and they were like, that's really great. We have a problem when we are creating these labels and we're putting them on the products. Maybe they were a third-party manufacturer for a medical device or whatnot. They're like, that would be wonderful to have in our environment to ensure that all of the products that we are shipping out have the correct label with the correct barcode that grades out at a high quality. So then we were talking, David and I, and well, we capture all of the design elements of it, but in the end, it's really the actual printed result on the label that gets applied to the package. And how can we bring all of that information into one location? So while we had all of that traceability and the tracking in Label Archive, we didn't have the end result. And so then, light bulb goes off and it's like, well, maybe we should. So that's where we really, hit the ground running and develop the solution to integrate the two systems. So we have the label archive system, we have the ODV 2D system, bringing that end result of that label printing and the quality associated with the barcodes together. And we feel that anybody who is doing high quality or requires high quality printing in their environment would definitely benefit from such a solution.
Yeah, I thought from a strategic alliance, it made perfect sense. You've got the TEKLYNX side with Label Archive, you're doing label design. You can centralize that label design and approval process. You can make sure that barcodes or serial numbers are not duplicated, that the right print job is going to the right printer. You can handle that on multi-locations throughout a company. And then on our end, we take the print job and then we print it, and we look at the data coming into the printer that we're supposed to be printing, and we compare that against the output on the other side. And if there's any issues, we stop the process, back up the label, and strike it out. We have the ability then to try to print it again and check it again. And if that's good, maybe we just had a spot on a ribbon that was bad, we continue the process. If not, we can bring the entire thing to a halt. And all of that is done without any extra labor, without that person who otherwise could be doing another task, sitting with a barcode scanner doing spot checks on various barcodes and labels that are coming out of the printer. The other thing that's exciting about this opportunity, we almost see it as insurance. When you print a label, and even when that label comes out of the printer and it's perfect, you're then affixing it to a box, a carton, or a container, and you're shipping that off. There's no guarantee that that label doesn't get damaged. Maybe someone puts another label on top of it and then pulls it off, ripping part of the label and destroying the barcode. You never know. But your responsibility as a manufacturer is to offer the best label that you can when it leaves your facility. And what we've got by being able to keep a database of the graded barcodes that came out of the printer and the print jobs is if there are issues and the company you're supplying to comes back to you with compliance issues, you've got this database that you can call up on this particular day, this particular shift. We printed the labels. Here were the grades as it came out of the printer. And, we've done our part to make sure that our quality is up to your standards. Sure. And I think this entire solution, again, it's a process, it's a solution, it's transferable to many companies out there, and we're very excited about this complete solution.
Yeah, I mean, and especially like if you were in a serialized environment where every single label has to have a serial number on it, and you sent that out and the person you're supplying those products to or those labels to says, oh, this label is bad, you can literally go into Label Archive and find that exact label, all of the information that was printed on that label, the grade of the label. And then if you want to go a step further, really interesting function that's in the ODV 2D solution is the ability to look at the image of that label. So if somebody really was like, no, it was bad, you can then say, well, in addition to the scanning and the ISO grading of it, well, here's an actual image of that label, just to make sure that, you have all of the, I guess, the deck stacked in the favor of yourself when you're up against somebody who's saying that your labels were bad. And then, of course, there would have to be further investigation to find out where the label was actually damaged or where the issue actually occurred. But just knowing that you are sending out labels of a high quality, that's probably the most important.
And you're proving that you've made a real investment in quality here.
And it doesn't take long to be able to get that proof. It's not like you got to do a lot of work. All of that information is available at the ready within Label Archive and then within the Printronix ODV 2D.
So an interesting question is, if you're a company out there that has not invested in something like Label Archive, what's the timeline? I mean, how quickly can they start evaluating Label Archive and seeing how it fits into their organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe a little loaded, as you know.
Okay. Yes.
Just because every customer is different, their needs are different. But just from being able to see the product, that's a day. I mean, it's hours actually. If we have availability to be able to show the solution, we definitely can call in, schedule some time with us, and we're able to show it to you. We can get you up and running with a proof of concept environment that you could try out as well. So those are things that can happen really fast. The fully validated environments, of course, take a bit longer. Something that we're now offering is the IQOQ PQ solution, so we can assist with that in your environment as well.
So you can take customers. I mean, some of the things that are interesting on looking through the literature, for instance, you can centralize label design throughout a company, throughout.
Sure.
I guess you could do that around the world, right? I mean, depending.
Yep.
Different countries, so that you make sure you've got a central repository and design team that's making sure that everything's in compliance, and that you don't have a rogue warehouse somewhere that's designing their own and using their own serial numbers.
Yeah. For people who are printing within their own environment, that's one thing. With the central solution, you can also expose that label to your third-party manufacturers. So say you had a standard that you want to provide to them, you can expose that out and they can leverage the central interface to print their own labels on their own site.
So that's a really interesting point. This is not just a product for companies that are supplying to vendors who have compliance programs, but it's a great product for companies who want to develop a compliance program of their own. In other words, to make sure that their inbound labels are matching up with their requirements for production, for instance.
Right.
When you think about having a corporate structure where you've got multiple locations throughout the country, throughout the world, or whatever, that becomes incredibly important. That you can, that we don't think about this all that often in the label world. But a label's part of a bill of materials. And it is really an important thing, even though it only costs a penny or so to produce, depending on the materials and the ribbons and everything used, of course. But it really becomes important. And if you don't do it correctly, it causes you a lot of issues. It causes you might have to reject shipments. You may have to, those products make it to the floor and they don't match up and you've got to stop production. There's risks inherent in having bad data on a label.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the auto manufacturers, Chevrolet, the Fords, the Volkswagens, Tesla, and their requirements, and in their documentation, one of the first things they say is this label that is coming on your product that you're supplying to us is our view into your organization. So the quality of that label, the accuracy of that label is the number one priority, because even if the product was exactly what they needed, if that label doesn't have that information on there and is not correct, that shipment gets returned. That's a problem. Or they have to stop the line. That's a huge problem. I've heard of fines being like $10,000 a minute. Every time this line's down, it's $10,000. Which I don't know if those actually make it all the way through and get paid, but I do know that there is a high cost, and so the importance of having that quality label is essential. In the end, it is to make sure that you have the ability to produce a solution, print a label, and ensure those labels are quality. And in the end, you're trying to avoid any missteps along the way of putting an incorrect label on, shipping a shipment out with bad labels on it that get returned. Because when that happens, what's required? Well, more resources. Either resources to redo the work, resources to answer those questions. It's just an expense across the board. And so when you know that you may have the potential to have limited resources, which we all do, you want to do the best job and the correct job right out of the gate to ensure you don't have those problems later on.
That's an excellent point. I think, what we've often, or historically, we've thought about, well, why do you have labels? Why do you have barcodes? Why do you have, barcode label printers? And ultimately, we've kind of viewed ourselves as a labor-saving device. Obviously, if instead of having to key punch data in, you can scan that data, it saves a lot of time. It increases accuracy. But then when we start really drilling down to the next level, I mean, that label represents a database behind it, that the serial numbers have to be correct. So, you get the wrong data to the printer and it prints out, that's fine. On your label archive, when you can help control all of these things, make sure that the design is approved on that label and that it hasn't been altered somehow at a different level, making sure that the data feeding through is correct. And then you kind of pass that over to a Printronix ODV 2D printer, and we make sure that the data that we received has passed through the printer and printed out and tested properly, and then send all that data back to Label Archive. And when you think about that, we've accomplished the original labor saving of using barcodes, but now we've added a whole nother layer of eliminating mistakes. And those mistakes can cause you a lot of time, a lot of labor time, and a lot of headaches and potentially compliance fines and other issues. I mean, you mentioned stopping a production line and getting fined for $10,000 a minute. That adds up quickly. If you talk about sending a container to a retailer who rejects your labels as either not scannable or incorrect format or whatever, those fines can quickly grow into hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So I think that's it becomes interesting, and it becomes a next level of quality when you're talking about a barcode labeling system.
Right. There's many ways that you can benefit from the solution that we have in place, but just one of the most basic ways is just organizing things. So I have the opportunity to talk with a lot of different customers and hear a lot of different stories about how different customers manage their labels in-house, and they have folders. People have them start on their desktop. They have multiple versions that they're not quite sure which one is the most current, and it might be in Joe's directory on his local drive or somewhere. What the Label Archive solution does is it just brings logic and some sense to the solution. It brings everything together. It helps centralize and maintains that. So you are printing, or at least assured that you're printing an approved label with the proper setup of the solution. This user can print to this label on this line, right? And that avoids a lot of potential problems, because there are a lot of specific requirements for different products. And if you're just grabbing the one you think is right and you start down the road and all of a sudden you're like, no, that's not the right one, or you have to ask somebody about it, all of that takes more time again. And again, we're trying to minimize the amount of time and effort that a company has to put into place. Now, of course, there's setup in the front end, but it pays back in dividends on the back end when you're able to ensure that you're printing the correct label at the correct time.
Yes, that's so. I mean, there again, it's kind of interesting how many different angles you go for. Just thinking about, again, from that whole saving labor, being more efficient. We look at it all these different ways. Label design, having one centralized label design function instead of spreading that out around the world, for instance. How much does that save?
I think just from a logic perspective, of course, the savings, knowing that, Sue can only print one label and that's the correct label for a particular line is critical. It just removes a lot of the guesswork out of there. It removes a lot of the potential training requirements associated to those resources that that may have a higher level of attrition.
Sure.
And you can then transfer to somebody else really quickly because they don't have to do a ton of learning. They're only able to get access to the labels that they're required to get access to and can only print on the lines that they're running. So I think one thing that, we talked about is, the peace of mind and, what kind of price can you put on peace of mind? But I think it's more than peace of mind. I mean, the reality is how many things can one person keep track of in their mind and at the same time? And we're not going to get into the multitasking discussion, whether or not that is possible, but just having the ability to do a lot of the setup and then know that it's in place. And if any time in the future that something does go awry, you have the ability to go, because you already have the setup done, you have the ability to go back and say, okay, what did happen? And then you can identify when you're trying to troubleshoot something or trying to do the cause and effect fishbone analysis of a problem, you can do it really quick. I mean, you got certain areas you can go and do those checks and then make sure that that process gets improved or education occurs if necessary. Or in the case, if we need to make a change or an improvement to our products, we are here for our customers. I mean, it's really a trifecta, of, the world that they work in, the customer's needs, and then us being a partner working with them. And then if at any time that they say, well, geez, we need the software to do this, or, we would, can the printer do that? We want to hear that. We want to work with them, identify those improvements, and then get those improvements included into our products. Yeah, I think another important point, and this is really for more of the technical heads out there that might be listening to this, is that our products, the TEKLYNX products and the TEKLYNX suite of products from an enterprise perspective and a label design perspective, we communicate with the Printronix Auto ID and TSC printers in their native language. And for those that are in the technical realm, they understand the importance of that. And it's actually twofold in this case. One, yeah, we're speaking natively to the printer, so it's an efficient communication. You're not sending big images or barcode images down to the printer. You're just saying, print me a code 128 or a QR code or a data matrix code or whatever it might be. But in addition to that, it also sends the information where on that label does it need to print, which the ODV2D unit can then use that information to say, I don't have to search this whole label to find the barcode. I already know where it's going to be printed. And then it leverages that information to focus in, and I even know what kind of barcode it is. So it takes less computing power for it to do that scanning.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. We call that barcode GPS, and that on the real estate of the label, we know just where every barcode on the label is, what its orientation is, what type of code it is. So we get that information, and we're doing two things then is, of course, the printer firmware is taking that information and formatting the label and printing it out. And then the ODV2D, the cameras that are attached to it, know exactly where to go to check those barcodes. They know what the data is that came into the printer. They know everything about that, including where it is on the label. So we can do this in real time, printing at 8 inches per second. So in other words, printing a 6-inch label in less than a second. We can process all that information and then report back to Label Archive.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So David, I also know that initially there were some challenges in getting the Printronix ODV2D solution up and running. There was like calibration steps and whatnot. But my understanding is you have some news about that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes, we have worked very hard. When we first introduced ODV2D to the world, it's a complicated set of cameras that are attached to the front of the printer. and they're tied into, of course, into the printer's firmware. So it's all incorporated into the printer. And it was a fairly first of its kind integration. So it was a fully integrated optical scanning using cameras. And it required specific calibration. So when you took it out of the box and attached it to the printer, you had to carefully calibrate it. So there was a training process that was involved for our resellers. And when they were selling in remote locations, you needed a technician to go out there to initially set it up. Once it was set up, it was pretty much bulletproof and it worked just fine. But we've worked very hard over the last several years, and now those the ODV 2D system can ship from the factory around the world, come out of the box. Printers start it up, and even a guy like me who's in marketing can start it up at a trade show and quickly be scanning and validating labels with it. So we've made it much more simple on the setup side. So the other thing I would also add is if anyone wants to see a demo of this, we have demonstration units that are available if we can work with you on opportunities. So thank you for that, Travis.
Yeah, no, and that's great news. I mean, I think there's the unknowns, right? Unknowns create a source of fear, and I don't know what it's going to be like, but and which I had a little bit about when we were talking about doing this. I'm like, well, getting that set up, and what if I have to recalibrate? I didn't go to class for that, so just having that assurance now that you get the printer, you put it in place, and you're good to go. I think that is super important, and really, again, going back to resources, right? Having that ability to do it and getting it up and running quickly is essential to make sure that you're not having to leverage as many resources in that process.
Yeah, we've really worked hard to make this pretty much the setup just like any other barcode label printer, except that it's got the additional capabilities of doing online data validation and verification of all your barcodes. So yeah, it was an exciting advancement for us, and it's given us the opportunity to increase our ability to distribute these printers around the world. So it's been a big deal for us as we've launched this in 2021.
Yeah, and I know this is a podcast, so the people listening, there are a lot of resources that we have on our websites and communications that we put out together where you can start digging into a bit more. For those like me, I'm visual. I like to see things. I like to draw the picture out. So listening to podcasts, sometimes I get part of the information and then I have to spend a bit of time trying to take a look at it so I can visualize it. So, but we do have those resources available if anybody is interested in taking a deeper dive or closer look. Of course, you can always contact TEKLYNX or Printronix Auto ID TSC to get more information as well.
Yep, and same on our side. We have product managers that can talk your ear off on ODV 2D, and if you want to come at this process through us, we can bring you back and get the right people to talk to at TEKLYNX. So we look forward to working with anybody out there listening who's interested in learning more.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Well, I think, Travis, we've covered a lot. I really appreciate the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And have you got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think in closing thoughts, yeah, there will always be challenges in our environment, in our businesses, and things that we have to work around or through or with to be successful. One thing that I've found that just really helps being successful is well, communication, of course, but then really partnering with the right people. And I feel that TSC Printronix Auto ID, David Lundeen, and your team are those people.
Thank you, and we feel the same. I think as we went through this process, and it was a somewhat long process that our engineering teams worked with each other on and everything. We've enjoyed it, and we look forward to a lot of success.
Excellent.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.